Anthony Moyles and Mossy Quinn have joined us to parse the weekend stuff, but really to look ahead to next weekend, because next weekend's the best weekend of Gaelic football that we've had in about a decade, right? 2 good games back to back, 2 days in a row.
Hopefully, anyway, yeah. Well, sitting here now, you can certainly look forward to it for a few days. You know, you're expecting 2 really competitive games, and I think, I would say, probably without question, the 4 best teams left in the championship, maybe Donegal, but I suppose after a performance at the weekend, it's hard for them to sit here and say anything. But yeah, no, really looking forward to it. Yeah, it's set up lovely.
Is there any chance that Dublin just steamroll Mayo and that we're wrong about this being an exciting game, Anthony?
Yep, there is. But let's enjoy it for the next 5 days before we get into that. I looked at the Mayo game twice, and you know, because obviously when you're watching it kind of real time, you're just kind of scratching your head saying, Jesus, you know, amazing performance. But there was probably a spell between about the 45th, 46th minute, kind of after they got the penalty, Donegal, where they really started to crank it up. They put Murphy in full forward. Keegan went in after him. He wasn't comfortable in there. They started to play a bit more direct. And I think in that spell, I didn't quite get it, but I think they kicked 5 or 6 really bad wides.
Murphy had one on his left foot where he won another great ball out in front of Keegan and turned onto his left, and you know, he was brilliant, but again, it was a score he would expect himself to get, and when he missed that, they never got it back to that kind of 1 point, got it back level. That would have been really interesting. And even there was a pick-up off the ground. Seamus O'Shea had a blatant pick-up off the ground. I think it was 65, 66, and that would have brought it back to 2, I think, going into those closing stages. But Donegal certainly kicked away a number of opportunities in that stage.
I thought they did, and I thought what they got wrong as well, like, which kind of, I did with the Super 8s has kind of shown, you know, your chat earlier on, it's like about dead rubbers and all that, but of course there's going to be that situation. But what I think the amazing thing that the Super 8s has shown is the strength of management teams and what they're able to bring to the party. Like if you looked at Mayo a couple of weeks ago, you never would have thought, I think, this performance was in them, you know. They were crestfallen. You know, they've lost 2 games this year. Donegal on the other side haven't lost a game, you know, and now they're gone. But yet they were able to get their matchups really, really well. Like Durkin on McHugh was, I think, the matchup of the game, even more than Keegan on Murphy, because if you watch, McHugh is so vital at bringing the ball into the areas and looking for those small little passes off, you know, from McBurty on the screen and all those different things. He's just so pivotal in that, and he just couldn't get going at all. Like Durkin got 3 scores. Like, that's unbelievable. Like, I know you were chatting earlier on about McCaffrey, but Durkin is my man who would take McCaffrey at the weekend. You know, you'd put him straight on him. But you know, Horan, to be fair to him, has done a massive amount of work, because I honestly didn't see the way he could be so dominant against Donegal. Okay, they got some players back, but in that first half, they were just ferocious. Like, I mean, I think the tackle count was 50 tackles to 20 after something like 40 minutes. That's serious intent, and they were swarming them, you know, and they were getting turnovers, really forcing it. And then once they took Murphy out, and Keegan did a remarkable job on that, and once they took McHugh out, they just said, right, well, we've got their 2 best lads, let's see how the rest of them you know, kind of match up. And unfortunately they didn't, for Donegal's point of view. And I think before it was too late, that they obviously got a fair ripping at half time, and they came out with a different set of intent, but the game was done by then, really, you know, even though they still could have got, I think, a lot closer to them.
Mayo kicked a lot of wides in that first half. You'd be concerned about that? Yeah,
their efficiency levels definitely need to improve. Like, they could have been further out of sight, certainly in the first half, and some of their option taking, like, it wasn't as if they were like, they're forcing shots, they're kicking off balance, they're kicking under pressure. And I think the Dublin defence, Dublin are happy enough to go out in terms of they know they're going to put up a big enough score. They're not going to go out and totally shut a team down. Or it's been a while since they've done that, so there is going to be opportunities for Mayo. So I think they're going to have to be really efficient if they're going to, the longer to stay in the game, they're going to have to take those chances, particularly early on. I think it's important they get off to a good start this weekend.
At the same time, you look at Dublin's statistic, and they haven't conceded a goal from play yet this year, so they seem to be kind of living happily enough with that idea that they are giving up chances, and there has to be some sort of method to what can sometimes seem like a bit of madness in that Dublin defence.
Yeah, I think so, but I suppose you have to give credit to the goalkeepers as well. I know Stevens made a number of very good saves. Evan Comerford came in at the weekend, and I know Conor McAlliskey had a chance early on that he probably would have been disappointed not to finish, you know. So I think the goalkeepers deserve credit for keeping those clean sheets. But Dublin do give up chances, you know. It's the way they play. They generally, often when Keane O'Sullivan plays, Johnny Cooper did a little bit at the weekend, it's kind of that +1 role. It's not really a, you know, teams rarely play 6 forwards up against them, so they generally have that additional defender there. But a lot of the time it is man-on-man matchups. You saw Rory O'Carroll, you see David Davy Byrne, you see McFitz at times, they're kind of, I won't say left one-on-one, they're trusted to be one-on-one, they're trusted to go and mark a man, and I don't expect this weekend to be any different.
Did you learn anything about the Dubs on Saturday evening?
Not really, no. Like, I mean, the Connolly thing was obviously, it was a good distraction as well as being everything else, but he just gives them that something different. You could actually get the sense of it, never mind even watching it, that there was just a different feel for the game regarding the intensity and the dead rubber effect of it, but he actually just gives them something different as an attacking team. He plays a different way. You can see straight away that there's a different, set of tactics nearly around him. The idea was giving the ball in. Well, I would assume, but he's such a good player. He's well able to drop into that hole. He gets his head up, and he's able to ping passes, and he has the confidence to ping passes left and right wherever he wants and wherever he chooses. So he releases inside forwards, as you would well know. They can have a different run. A lot of the Dublin inside forwards a lot of the time is doing loop runs and coming in at angles where McCaffrey, McCarthy, these guys have made really lung bursting runs, and they're looking for fellas to come off, or then there's a bit of patience with Kilkenny going left and right. Whereas with Connolly, as soon as you see him get the ball, you can say, okay, I'm going to make a run here, left, right. I'm going to come across, diagonal run, 20 or 30 or 40 yards from goal, and generally he'll get me the ball and I can spin and kick it. So for that sense, I think he brings a massive addition to the team. And I think even for that alone, for 20, 25 minutes, possibly, I don't know, in a game that maybe is a bit stifled, and when defenders start to tire a bit, the conditions will take effect, obviously, on at the weekend. I think it's meant to be really, really heavy rain on Saturday, so you could have a situation where the ball is very, very slippy, and it might be just a matter of actually, let's just keep a hold of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mike Quirk is writing this morning about this idea that a lot of people have actually come up with, that Diarmuid Connolly is a bit of a distraction for everybody. I think that perhaps that's overthinking it a little bit, that Jim Gavin wouldn't do anything to kind of sidetrack the media or anything like that. But is there a tangible sidetracking element of Diarmuid Connolly against Mayo? Like, we talk about Jack McCaffrey, we talk about Kieran Kilkenny, who perhaps at this moment are more vital cogs in the Dublin engine, that perhaps if you do have Diarmuid Connolly involved against Mayo, the Mayo management are thinking, well, we've had certain success against this guy in the past, and it is a diversion tactic against this specific team.
Yeah, I think everyone's overthinking it a little bit, yeah. Sorry, I think Diarmuid first and foremost can help on the pitch, and I think he kind of proved that at the weekend. Obviously in a lower intensity game than what they're going into this weekend, but his skill set that he brings, and Anthony talked about the runs forwards, you can make any run. Like, as in, you don't have to, sometimes when you're inside and you're looking at the person out the pitch, you kind of have to make your run based on their skill set. So if a certain player's coming, like Jack's strength is carrying the ball, he's a good kick passer, but he's a brilliant ball carrier. Whereas with Diarmuid, if he has the ball in his hand, you can make any run, and generally he looks for the most dangerous one. So as an inside forward, if you're going to show, instead of having to maybe show out to the stand side so it can be popped in front, well, I can go a yard here and then cut back, and he's going to look for that, and we've a goal chance on, So I think he brings that element to the game. I also think, if you look at it, like Mayo a couple of years ago, when he came on at half time, they had Keegan detailed to Kieran Kilkenny. They didn't change that, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see a different management team back again this year, whether they change it, but I think he's a serious option going forward.
The other thing I think we did learn was that so there's been a lot of talk about Paddy Small kind of coming into the team, and then he got his chance and went off very quickly with a hamstring injury, and then apparently played well. I didn't see the last game, but he apparently played well in that one, and he's nailed that down. I would say he's probably one of the first attacking subs off the bench now. And I'd say suddenly Bugler has become an option as an attacking sub off the bench, whereas before that it had always been McManaman, you're our first guy up, and I'm not sure that hierarchy exists anymore. So McEntee's writing today in the Examiner saying that he thinks that the game at the weekend demystified the subs bench. I'm not quite sure if that's the case. I think their subs bench still looks pretty good.
The subs bench is still massively strong. Like, Bugler comes on and takes his chance, and that's really all you can expect. And from a situation, like, it's a tricky situation to come in. We've been you have a challenge game or something coming up to a big game. Fellas are minding themselves. There's not the same level of intensity. Whether you shoot the lights out or play really, really well, are the management team still kind of looking at you and going, well, it's only a low level intensity game, so yes, he's a 8 or 9 out of 10, but what would he be next week against Mayo? Is that a 5 or 6? So do you always go back to the tried and tested who've done it for me before? I think he can't. I think Bugler, to be honest, puts his hand up in a very, very strong way and says, listen, I can give you something different. The same way, obviously, as Diarmuid Connolly is essentially a new player for Dublin, for this Dublin squad, and he's a player who like Horan will be scratching his head on this week, kind of going, when he comes in, how do I reshape things here? Because he gives something completely different to Kilkenny, to Howard, to Scully. Completely different, even to Conor Callaghan. Conor Callaghan's a very direct type of player. Connolly is this, guy who can just do different things. So I think he's up the pecking order. I think Bugler's up the pecking order. Strength-wise, I thought Rory O'Carroll had a decent game. I thought he had a decent game when he came in. I think he was strong. So I think
got caught under a couple of balls though.
He did, but and Tyrone, you could definitely see that they were trying to expose him one-on-one, where they flushed everyone out and then they looked to get a ball and then they were pinging kind of outside of the right diagonal balls in on top of him. There was one or two, like Evan Comerford came for one, looked a bit tricky, just managed to get a hand on it. You would imagine Cluxton would be able to patrol that, and now Dublin will also say to themselves, listen, this is a ploy. So next week I would imagine they'll have someone back closer in.
Yeah, well, who was playing sweeper at the weekend? I wasn't sure.
Well, I don't know. Again, Johnny Cooper was probably playing that. Right. He was in that 6 role, and again, when Tyrone dropped off, it would have been his responsibility, I would have thought. But again, they can filter different guys back. But I suppose when you're looking at the strength and depth, the reason Dublin have been so successful in the last couple of years is because they've had the best squad. It's not the best team. It's generally the best squad that wins the All-Ireland. And I don't know that I wouldn't agree with Tony in the Examiner today in relation to that in terms of it demystified anything. Like, do you put more weight on the last 15 minutes, someone coming on against Roscommon when they're 15, 20 points up, than you do in a game up and home? I know it was a dead rubber, the intensity wasn't the same, but it depends on, I'd imagine management are looking at a body of work rather than, okay, he had a really good 20 minutes here, let's go all in on that. I think there is more to that. So I know you tend to kind of overreact at times and say, well, he didn't have his best 20 minutes there, so he's now gone out of the pecking order. I think what Dublin have shown in the last couple of years, they kind of can go a horses for course thing. Like Owen Merchant came in last year because there was very specific roles from, he matched up well with certain players and certain teams, and I think that'll be the same this weekend. I think Jim will look at the Mayo defence, if we're talking about it from an attacking perspective, and say, well, hang on, who do we think is going to be effective here? Like, we haven't spoken about Cormac Costello as well. Like, I think Dean is back into that starting team as the main free taker, but for me, Cormac has a huge amount to offer from play again, as he's shown in previous years off the bench. So like, you still have Paddy Small has been excellent, he's made impacts, you've Dermot, you've Kev Mack, you've Cormac Costello, so I wouldn't be overly concerned in terms of which order they come in or who they have. The options are there based on whatever matchup you feel needs adjusting. And
whatever the weaknesses that Mayo are showing in that game. So who are the starting 6 then at the weekend if Dean Rock is going to start?
Well, I'd be surprised if there was a change from, if you look at what started against Roscommon the last day, you're going to have Brian Howard and Niall Scully as the wing forwards with Kieran likely centre forward, and then I think the inside line, Paul Mannion and Con are definitely going to play, and I think Dean Rock is going to play. So for me, I'd be surprised if there's a change. If all 6 are fit, I would say that would be the starting 6.
It's not bad.
Yeah, and like, and if you talk about the different styles of play, I actually thought I was pleased to see they have predominantly in the last year or so been much more of a running team, and they're kind of grinding teams down. They're much more direct against Roscommon, and I know you talked about the option Dermot brings, but Niall Scully played some really good balls inside. Brian Fenton, they were kicking the ball a lot more against Roscommon. They let ball inside, and like, there's times you're sitting in the stand and I know there's high percentage passes, but I'm sitting there looking, I'm like, you've got Conor Callaghan in there, you've Paul Mannion in there, you've Cormac Costello in there. Kick the ball into them, get it into them. If they're in one-on-one, get it into them, let them have the ball. And I think it'd be interesting to see how Mayo do have a strong defence, and they generally will have, they'll say to Brendan Harrison, okay, you go out and pick up if it's Con or whoever it is. But
the full-back line will play in front of you, which means there's goal chances there if the ball goes past them.
Yeah, and if they get good enough ball in, and that's what, and I think the skill set, you see Con, you see Paul, they can win. Dean, they're very good ball winners, and you either have a runner coming off the shoulder, or if they're left in enough space they can get a ball and turn and go at them themselves. So they were more direct against Roscommon, and I think it's something that it worked well for them in that game, and they will do it. And obviously then Dermot adds another dimension to that if they need to get deliveries inside.
Mossy, do you think that that's a plan B, a sort of situation where they've kind of been in a couple of All-Ireland finals, mostly against Mayo in recent years, where they needed something a little bit different? It felt like they hadn't reached peak Dublin in those All-Ireland finals, and perhaps it was just how they set up. They needed something a little bit different, and they've come up with that this year, the more direct ball.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's more there's a trust there, and they play it as they see it. Like, and again, different guys have different skill sets, so it's not going to be when James McCarthy or Jack get the ball, you don't necessarily want them saying, oh well, now we're on to, we have to kick it long, we have to look long. Like, nearly one of the best things to watch in Croke Park these days is when Jack McCaffrey gets the ball, he lines someone up and you know he's going to run by him, and you can nearly feel it in the crowd. It's one of those things, and I don't think there's going to be a massive shift in terms of, but there's certainly going to be, the option is now there where they're going to say, okay, for a long time we were very high percentage and we were very more, if it's not 100% on, we're going to recycle it and we're going to come back across the line and we're going to be patient, and they were doing that, and a lot of that was due to the way teams were setting up at the back, and they were saying, okay, we're going to pull you out of position, we're going to shift everyone over to this side, create a space, going to create here, we'll get an overlap and then we'll score. And whereas I think now, if teams are kind of trying to push up in and around the 45-yard line and not get sucked in as much, and that might leave those pockets inside where you can say, okay, well now can we just, let's put a ball in front of Con and let's see what happens, let's put a ball in. So I think it's more you kind of, they play it as they see it in terms of how defence is set up, rather than going out with themselves saying, right, and what do you call it, plan B. I think the really good teams, and I think all 4 teams this weekend should be able to play in different styles, and they can adapt in game. It shouldn't come down to a big call coming in from a runner coming in making a change. And I think it's just, they're just trying to continuously improve and to continuously add to how they can hurt teams.
If you were James Horan and his brains trust this week, Anthony, what are you saying? How are you trying to beat this Dublin team? What is the weakness that has emerged as they've battered teams week on week?
Yeah, I think this is above my pay grade. Yeah. People are saying about the full back line, and the susceptibility to the high ball and all that stuff. And look, it's kind of there because it's nearly gathering pace itself. But high balls will always cause a bit of mayhem if you've one-on-one inside. They will. But if someone actually sat down and probably looked at the effectiveness of it, or the percentages of actual scores versus the amount of ball go in, and also it's quite a difficult thing to do because you need the right man on the ball who can actually hit that pass.
And the right men inside to be able to win it as well.
Correct. Yeah, and the fellas. So do Mayo have that? Like when you look at the kind of team, I don't think Mayo are going to bring anything massively different to it. But Mayo are Mayo, and what they'll decide to do is they will have certain matchups that they will feel they have to get right. So the McCaffrey matchup is a massive one. I think you have to man mark him. Now, whether you decide that Durkin can do just a similar job that he did against McHugh, which is stick with him wherever he goes, but then as soon as we win the ball, you're also on the front foot. Possibly, yes, I think he has it, but could they use him somewhere else, and could they put someone like that, the young lad Carr, on him, who has massive pace? I think that'd be a big ask, but they could put someone who's just going to nullify McCaffrey and literally just take himself out of the game and say, well, I'm going to stop you. That's just one of many. Fenton is an issue, obviously. So,
What do you do with Fenton?
I think you just have to match up against them, and as soon as they have the ball, you have to stick with them. You have to man mark them, and then when we have the ball, you just have to try and get away from them and influence the game. Like O'Shea did that to a certain degree. You could decide to put, Keegan on him. Keegan. I watched Keegan against Murphy. And, if you watch any of the plays, and I was a bit disappointed with Donegal. Donegal had to have known this was coming, and I really thought Bonner, not that he hung McHugh and Murphy out to dry, but there was a real lack of plan B from Donegal, I felt. They should have known that this is going to happen. They're going to definitely try to take these two fellas out. So we need to alter the way we play. We need to maybe look at, McHugh was still trying to make those lung-bursting runs, and Dersham was just cutting them off every time. Instead of maybe saying, okay, you know what we're going to do? They changed it in the second half when they put Murphy inside, but they needed to really question it from the start. Horan knew exactly what they were going to do, and he said, right, we're going to set up that way. Now, coming into this game, you have a situation with Fenton where I would think I'd put probably Keegan on him. Now, I know there's a massive height differential there, but at the same time, if you can get O'Shea close to him, or if you even just say, listen, we're going to give you the kick out to a certain degree, but then you give Dublin the ball, that's a recipe for disaster too. It's difficult to picture, it really is.
I think one of the things that the way the run has gone for Mayo, they might have come into a situation where they have a stronger squad now. Like Matthew Rowan came on. I think if Rowan had stayed fit, he would have been the type of player they would have been saying, well, let's see. And I know it's a big step up, a big ask, but I think he would have been the one they would have been looking at to try and match up in midfield. And he come on, played at the weekend. There's talk Diarmuid O'Connor could be back this weekend. So all of a sudden, Mayo could have that.
Can you start Diarmuid O'Connor after that absence with a broken wrist? Can you?
For me, you can. Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, as in if you've a broken wrist, you're still capable of doing your fitness work. You're still getting, so in terms of it's his match sharpness, but it was what 5-6 weeks ago in terms of, you know, like I would
he's probably even doing ball work. It's probably contact that he's, you know, the major thing that he's not allowed to do.
So either if you start him or you know you have him there to come in, and I think they have a little bit more strength and depth. Certainly when they look to the line now, there's a little bit more, I'd say, when they're looking at a guy coming in going, is he going to make an impact? Can he do an important role for us? And I think that they probably have a call to make with Andy Moore, whether they start Andy or not. I know they brought him in early at the weekend. Now it's one of those, if you don't start him, how early do they use him? And I know Mick Fitzsimons has done a good job on him the last couple of times in Croke Park, and then if you don't start him, what will you get off Darren Cohen then? On the flip side, you start him and hope he gets a couple of points early on and he's in the game, and then you have another option, you know. So I think these are the calls that James have to, like some of the individual matchups. When I say there won't be a right or wrong answer, in the sense that if you put someone on Fenton and Jack does damage, or you put someone on Jack, you know, with Dublin it's kind of a
rob Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, a little bit. So you can kind of overthink that a little bit. Sometimes you need to, like, you're going to need a massive performance from Colin Boyle. You're going to need other guys to step up who might be given a detailed, you know. So I think that's from a squad perspective what to be looking at. But they will be hoping that they've more options for this weekend.
Cohen's a worry. His performance was a worry at the weekend. You know, you don't necessarily. I felt after 20 odd minutes they had to bring Andy Moore in. He obviously came in to try and prove a point. He kicked a lot of, I thought, rash shots wide, especially in that period, that last 10 minutes of the first half. You know, he obviously shows his ball-winning ability and his ability to get up his head. He's an intelligent footballer, but you would have rather your starting 14 to do damage, you know, because now you have a big question mark. Yeah. Which is just what Mossy said. You're going, geez, like, do we start him? You know, he's low in confidence now. He knows that this fella's breathing down his neck. And some fellas can take that on as if, no, I'm the man to do this, don't worry about him, or some fellas can shy away. So I don't know the lad, you know, and it's going to be a big ask for him this week of whether he can go in against the best football team with the best back line, and can he really take the game by the scruff of the neck, or does Andy come forward? And then if Andy doesn't work out, you're now bringing in a guy who's low in confidence. Big question mark for them.
From a Dublin defence perspective, is Cian O'Sullivan fit? Is he? Because I haven't kind of seen him nailed down. Is he grand? Is it going to be him, or what do you expect to play in the back six?
To my knowledge, he is. Yeah, I don't know any different. And he didn't start the Roscommon game. I know Johnny Cooper was coming back from injury, and Johnny and James McCarthy came back in that day. So. The back six will end up being like the options for the six are obviously Mick Fitz, Davy Byrne, Philly McMahon, Johnny Cooper, and then I think John Small, Jack McCaffrey will play, and so you've got Keane then to go in there. So there's obviously
someone to come out.
Yeah, now again, whether they play James in the backs or whether they push James into midfield. Yeah. So I think there's probably one of those defenders that lose out. So it just depends what way they go, whether it'll be Cian O'Sullivan or possibly Davy Byrne or Mick Fitz. I would have thought John Small will definitely play. Yeah. Jack McCaffrey will obviously play. I'd say Johnny Cooper and Philly McMahon will play. So it comes down to the other.
I think they're slightly altering really the defensive setup more than anything. You know, the way like Cian O'Sullivan would drop off, you know, he would always be your extra man, as Mossy said, that +1 type thing. And I think teams have kind of tried to work that out now and have tried to attack him or go mark him and then take him on runs and bring him out. Which showed a little bit this year that there was a capability of doing that. So I think Gavin has realised that and said, okay, we need to just alter our defensive structure just a slightly thing.
How has he done that?
Well, I think by the Cooper thing, I think he's nearly brought nearly 7. You know, when you look at it, you know, he has his set backline, but he's nearly brought in an extra man as well. So if 6 does get pulled out, he's trying to hold that middle a bit better. It's a problem. We saw it against, you know, Meath, Kerry and Meath this weekend. You know, we spoke about this before. That middle spine, if you can manage to pull that 6 away, and you can get quick hands through the middle, there's goals there. And you know, Kerry were probably, you know, once or twice it happened to them. And the same thing has happened to Dublin. Although they haven't conceded a goal, to be fair, if you can manage to do it. But it's the real key to, like, I mean, if you're playing a 6 or even 8 defenders, if you can manage to get that middle opened up, it's like, you know, it's like opening up the course that you just, everything else falls apart and you can just send runners down with quick hands. If you have a situation where that is solid, obviously you have to go out to the wings. So the key to Dublin and the key to Mayo, to be fair to them, will be sending runners hard down that channel. And that's the likes of Keegan, Dirk, and, you know, these guys coming off, really running at pace, and trying to expose that middle. But again,
yeah, for a long time it was probably, whether it was Keane O'Sullivan, detailed to be that guy, and the other defenders knew, well, we'll stay here, we'll go to our position because Keane will generally get to where he needs to be. Whereas it doesn't necessarily need to be one person. I think one of the things you've seen teams do now, and it's not just Dublin, it might necessarily be the guy wearing 6 or the guy wearing 4, whatever it might be. If the ball's coming down the right hand side, then the wing back here can filter back, and you might see Brian Howard or Niall Scully, or, you know, whoever, James McCarthy if he's playing midfield. So it doesn't necessarily need to be one detail guy, because that can possibly become a bit predictable, and then teams can say, well, we know in this situation when we're attacking, the number 6 is going to drop, so then we've an opportunity here, and that's when you can be got at. Whereas then if you can, it takes a lot more work on the training ground, a lot more trust to be built up, that if all of a sudden the 6 is now going pressing, thinking, well, I've got whoever's playing 5 coming in behind me, he has to know that's there, and that takes, it probably doesn't give you that same level of security, because if 5 has got caught up the pitch, or he's slipped, or he's the two of himself and the wing forward are dragging each other on the ground, all of a sudden you might have that hole there. So I think that's where that's one of the observations I've had in this year's championship. I think you've seen teams start to do that a little bit more, where a wing forward might filter, and again, it's not an expectation he's going to make a 70-yard run every time, where you don't see Dublin players or even Mayo players just running blindly back to get back into a spot, you know. But I do think there's a possibility of doing that rather than having just one player detail to be that kind of +1 or that sweeper, you know. It's
a collective responsibility for the style of play. I think so, yeah. The other game obviously this weekend, which we'll build up to properly again later on during the week, is Tyrone and Kerry, and I make Kerry slight favourites on the back of pardon me, they've put in a signature performance already in the championship this year. Is that wrong? Or do we overrate that game against Mayo?
I don't know if we overrate it. I think yes, they possibly are slight favourites, but I think Tyrone are coming in, and like that, it couldn't have lined up better for Tyrone, really, with, you know, the weekend that's gone, because he's able to try lads, he's able to see who puts their hands up, he's able to give fellas a rest. It wasn't a walk in the park for Kerry in Navan. They rested a couple of fellas, but I think at certain times they had to dig a little deeper than they probably, you know, would have wanted. And I think it probably also gives Mickey Hart another look at them in a competitive environment. The second half against Cork is the Tyrone that I expected. I do not think that Hart wanted to show that hand as quickly as he had to. I'd say he would have rather keep that as the ace in the pack. And I think against Cork, they were in serious bother at half-time, and I think he had to do it. And Donnelly obviously went inside and made hay, you know, and caused mayhem. And that's obviously the way, that's their plan B. I don't really think, I think they match up well. I think they're a strong, very, very strong physical team. Again, they've changed and they've altered sometimes the way they play. But Kerry have massive power going forward. You know, the more in midfield, sometimes he's good, sometimes he's really good, sometimes he kind of peters out of games. He doesn't really dominate as much as I'd like to see him dominate. Their kick-out was torn apart a little bit by Meath when they really high-pressed them. Now, I know there was a breeze against them, but even the second half, I thought they did quite well on the kick-out. But their forwards play. But I'm still worried. I'm quite worried about their sixth position. I'm quite worried about that central area. It's not necessarily 6, but I'm worried about that central area where sometimes they do get pulled and dragged, just like what we were just talking about. The communication, I think, is key. When you talk about Dublin, I think the communication in that, if you're playing that zonal defence, and having guys tucking in, so if the ball is over on the left and you're having guys, so that takes massive communication. Now, I'm not talking about roaring and shouting, but just even a quick word to Mossy, you know, I've pushed in, you push out right. That's all it takes. But to do that in the white heat of battle is something that Dublin have down. The Tyrone defensive setup is extremely good, and they're extremely comfortable in it, and it will be very, very interesting. I think they'll bring absolutely everything in a very, very physical way against those Kerry forwards. I think Clifford will get, whatever he got against Donegal, he'll get twice as bad. From a physical matchup. I think O'Shea will get the exact same. And it's going to be question marks again for them, because they're a young forward line, and they're definitely going to ask them the physical questions first and foremost. There'll be plenty of afters, there'll be plenty of...
Talking me into Tyrone here.
Well, I just think they'll bring that edge. They have to bring that edge, because Tyrone, at their best, have always had that edge. They've always had that edge. They've always had the physical battle first. They try to wear you down, hitting you on the ground. They win a ball off you, they're talking to you on the ground as a forward. They'll have to bring that. But Kerry will have to realise that this is coming, and we just have to keep chipping away at the scoreboard.
Sometimes you really have to go through that, though, to understand what it is. And I actually think that the Donegal game might stand to them a little bit. If David Clifford made 25 runs against Donegal, he was probably checked 21 times. Yeah. He will be checked every single time. But the fact that he was through it, probably not to the same level, but the fact that he's gone through it in the last couple of weeks, and I think for me it's how the Kerry forward line react to seeing that defensive setup, and you can try it in training and you can practice it, but once you're out there and being in Croke Park, and if Sean O'Shea gets swallowed up and gets turned over and there's 4 or 5 of them in ripping the ball to move quickly, it's how they react to that early on. And but I do think this Kerry forward line probably have enough in them that they have that kind of cockiness, probably is the word, kind of inside, that they back themselves, and I think they'll relish it. I think there will be times that they'll be scratching their head a couple of times and say, okay, that didn't work, we can't do that again. But once it doesn't get in on them, and once they don't kind of overthink it at times, I think if they keep the ball moving, they have guys, they've Stephen O'Brien, they've Paul Gainey, they've other guys, they've enough quality around them to help them, and I think that for me is the winning and the losing of the game. If the Kerry forwards can keep their heads, not get dragged down, not get into that where you see Clifford chasing the fella and trying to then think, I'm going to get him back here. That's not his game, that's not what he's there to do. If he's doing that, then the Tyrone backs have kind of won effectively, so I think that's the thing. If the Kerry forwards can keep themselves in it, I think that'll be huge.
What is that like as an inside forward coming up against Tyrone, and there's a fella constantly in your ear or goading you or whatever it may be, and the ball's down the other end of the pitch? Would that have wound you up? Is that something you really advise for David Clifford, basically?
Yeah, I think it was something that you had to learn. You kind of have to go through it to kind of understand what the right reaction is, and I think certainly the first couple of times that it happens, or certainly the first time, for me there was a kind of not a wow, but you're kind of looking around going, this doesn't usually happen. You might get 1 or 2, you kick a free or you kick whatever, you might get a small bit. The Mead lads weren't saints over the years either, but it certainly wasn't to the same level. It was always a kind of they might have ramped it up, or it was probably more the physicality, it was the pulling and dragging and the hits you might get after the ball. And I think once you've gone through it a couple of times, you go, okay, well, they're obviously doing it to try and put you off your game. If you're starting engaging with them, if you start talking back to them, if you think, I'm going to nail him the next time he gets the ball, that's not what I'm there to do. That's not how I help my team. So I think that's the big thing. You've got to try and work out, well, what am I here? What's my role? How can I be the best player I can be for the team today? And I think they want to drag you down. They're doing that to try and put you off your game, and I think the more you realise that. But for me, it was definitely being in that moment, being in that situation, going through it 2 or 3 times. I'd react very differently now, or a few years after, than I would have done the first time. So I think that's why the Donegal game might stand to them, and you do learn from being in those situations. So I think that's one of the things, to make sure they stay in it and don't try and think that the best retaliation is for David Clifford to go and score a goal. And I think that's the big thing. And again, he strikes me as the type of character. You saw Donaghy years ago, remember the famous one in Armagh when he scored the goal, and you could see him, was it over Francie Bellew, when he shot him down to Paul Herty. Donaghy was the type of character that was his reaction, and he knew that was the answer. And I think he said it before, that he was more used to it even from basketball, and even from the whole thing. Whereas it probably took some of the other Kerry forwards or Dublin forwards or other guys of that era a bit longer to understand, well, that is the reaction, that is the way to do it. And Clifford kind of strikes me as that type of guy. I don't know that he'll need a huge amount, but
he's got plenty of it in club games in Kerry, as we all know. There's 3 quick stories I want to get your reaction to. Jack O'Connor, the Kildare rumours this morning. Is this a good move, Anthony?
Yeah, I was chatting to Mossy about it. He obviously, his 2 sons are playing in the Kildare. He does a bit of coaching there, but I think it's a strange move from Kildare, in the sense of it's a county that I feel, after Keane O'Neill, I thought they'd go for someone like a Glenn Ryan type figure, or someone who's a former player, to try and help the identity there a bit more.
As in, they don't have an identity.
Well, I think they're a team maybe that are searching for it a bit more. Like, I mean, back in the Johnny Doyle days and the Dermot Early days, there was an identifiable, the white jersey, the lily whites. There was this whole thing about the style of play that they had.
That was McGeaney.
Yeah, well,
that was McGeaney era. Like, because before he came in, gave them an identity. Took a little while, but it was clear what they were trying to do. And since he's gone, it's been, what are we?
I think it is a little bit. Look, it's funny. Last year, they had the Newbridge or Nowhere. That gave them an identity for a period of time.
Yeah.
It gave them a cause. I honestly felt that they should have built on that. They should have had that kind of mantra nearly for the whole team. That it's this is us. This is where these are the heights that we can get to. I think Keane O'Neill was making progress. I don't know. I don't really. It's a very, very difficult situation when you're in the Leinster Championship and you have the behemoth that's Dublin sitting there all the time. It is very, very difficult because you're being measured against that nearly all the time.
Yeah, you kind of need to ignore that. But
yeah.
You need to become an established first division team like everybody's trying to do.
I think it has to be more than that. Like, as in, you might play Dublin once or twice a year. There's so much more that has to go into what's going on with the county. And for me, I think it's probably a good appointment if Jack does take it. I think he's obviously proven, certainly with Kerry, in terms of how his team's played, even his own character, what he's like. And I think you talked about giving them an identity. I think he'll come in and he'll certainly put his own stamp on it if he does come in and take them. And I think it'd be interesting to see.
Last thing I'm just saying, like, I mean, you'd know this more than I, so maybe you don't want to mention it, but I think a lot of people would feel that O'Connor during that era, when he was over, probably should have won and could have won a lot more All-Irelands with that team. That would certainly be the feeling that Owen said to me a number of weeks back. Yeah, of course you could. But it's a positive appointment. They need someone early, and they need someone who's going to bring something different to them.
Paul Galvin taking the Wexford job?
Interesting. I'd say. I think Wexford football, once the hurlers are going well, footballers struggle, right? And you have a situation like that. It's nearly vice versa. He's going to bring a different dynamic to it. He's a little bit different, and I think Wexford have always been a little bit different in football sense. You never kind of quite know what you might get. But look, I mean, he's a fair job on his hands.
What's his pedigree?
Well, he's played and won a number of All-Irelands.
As a coach? Like, I mean,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much he has coached. I'm not sure. I think he was involved with London this year. He helped out them, I think, a bit. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, Owen. It is
a couple of development squads in Kerry as well, the schools team. I think it's a very, very big. I think it's a risk from Wexford. I think it's a big appointment. It's a big name appointment. There's no question about that. And everybody here in the media will be delighted to have Paul Galvin involved with the team. It's the question, did they analyse what is exactly his footballing coaching pedigree rather than...
I'm assuming, well, in that situation, for me, I have a lot of respect for Paul taking it on, and I'm assuming he's gone into this with his eyes open, in the sense that I doubt he's gone in saying, well, I'm going to coach a team, I'm going to do... You'd imagine he's gone into this with a plan. He's looked at it and says, to be an inter-county manager at the moment, you need X support around you, you need expertise, you need skill sets. So for me, it's one of those, him as a figurehead, it's the guys he brings with him and the team he puts with him, and that for me will determine where they go as a team or as a squad. And I think that I'd imagine if I was a Wexford player, that's what I'd be interested in seeing. First and foremost, Paul Galvin gets your respect. You're there going, okay, I'd be interested. I'd be saying, yeah, this is a guy I want to see his thoughts on the game, how you play the game, how you prepare a team, and then who he has with him. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't have high caliber guys with him that are going to go in, and you've got, then it's the whole setup, because generally you walk into a dressing room, it's not the manager and two selectors anymore, it's the whole makeup of it. I think that for me is that'll transpire over the coming months.
Yeah, I think it would be a bigger risk for them not to get somebody high profile at the moment for Wexford football to try and because they're in competition with the hurlers.
Yeah, and you're going to answer his phone call if it comes.
Absolutely.
If it's a Wexford fella who's been managing clubs, there's probably history there. Like, I think Wexford have a lot of players. They just need to get lads actually involved and get teams out.
Certainly there'll be far more interest in Wexford football next season because of it. Lads, good stuff. Thanks a million. Enjoy the week and the build up and whatever comes. Who's going to be in the final? Very quick, very briefly.
Dublin Kerry.
I think Dublin Tyrone.
Right, okay. There is a debate to be had all week, and we'll be having it here.